From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I hope you really liked that new intro. It's a new intro I had recorded a couple weeks ago, and it's now become kind of the top of the show. The show's a little bit been on hiatus lately. The reality is I've been just trying to figure out how to clean up the back issues of the show. There'll be show notes coming for every episode back to episode 1. I've already started working on them. Hopefully they'll be done in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but time will tell. There's always clients and other work in the middle of it all, but at least I'm moving in that direction. In this week's show, I sit down with my two good friends, Jeff Brown and Scott Mills, and we talk about what I call the sad state of social media. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, relax, and enjoy this engaging conversation. Hey all, Rob Cairns here. I thought we'd do something a little different today. I'm here with my two good friends, Mr. Scott Mills and Mr. Jeff Brown, both friends of the show. And I thought we'd dive into a subject I call the sad state of social media. Let's start with Scott. Scott, I want to welcome to the show my good friend and social media expert, Scott Mills. How are you today, Scott?
Good, thanks, Rob. How are you?
Doing well. And Jeff is a workplace education trainer and spends a lot of his time training in social media. How are you today, Jeff?
We're doing, Scott, and we're excited about the talk today. This has been something that's been on the burner for a while.
It sure has, Jeff. And I'm going to dive right into a subject that we talk about, and that's mobs on social media. And I'm going to dive right into the GameStop situation because we might as well start heavy and go light. So do one of you want to take what do you think about the GameStop situation and the whole mess on Reddit?
Let me take a first crack at it. It literally showed us that it's not a free market anymore. Few get all the goodies, and the rest of us, I mean, imagine limit, you can only buy one share. Is this a free market or what? And then the guys that got all the money began to start losing their money in big time. They put the brakes on so they could at least get out of there and a little better, while a lot of the other guys kind of got cleaned. What do you think, Scott?
I think you just have to be really careful who you're dealing with. It doesn't matter what platform you're on or what the situation is. It all comes down to relationships and trusted relationships with people, and don't you don't want to put your money into something that looks too good. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, because it started off pretty cheap, and then people just decided, hey, we're all going to pile on, and the thing went right through the roof.
Yeah, but there are situations where stocks do start out cheap and move for the right reason. We take a stock called Zoom in the last year, and what happened with Zoom was it started cheap and it grew, but that was because of the pandemic and other things. So we can't kind of say every stock that grows we got concerns with. We got to look at why it's growing and do our due diligence, right?
Yeah. So. But at the end of the day, though, you got to remember how this thing started. The bunch of guys decided they're going to get rid of GameStop as far as the market, and they decided they're going to short it. And I mean, there's a lot of geeks around. They decided, hey, we love GameStop. For the all intents and purposes, they picked this thing. They just started buying it, and it went. And it didn't, at the end of the day, didn't get a chance to correct. It was definitely overinflated, but like everything, it never got a real chance to correct. And if you're a geek and you love video games, video game companies are near and dear to you. And the fact that someone's going to try to pummel, to destroy, and brag about it ahead of time, that's not cool. That's like, want to fight.
Yeah, I actually, if anybody doesn't know, I'm a classic video game collector. So I actually have an original Atari, original Nintendo, and original Mattel and television. So yeah, I like video games too, but I wasn't getting involved in that mess. Scott, the regulatories are involved both in Canada and the US now. What's your opinion on that? Or is it too late, too little?
Well, everything out there seems to get regulatory bodies in it after something big has happened and there's already a lot of victims. It's kind of like responding to a call as a police officer after the fact. You can't save something when it's already there. But hopefully the regulatory bodies can put some process in place to deal with kind of the modern state of now and prevent victimization moving forward.
Yeah. So,
and it kind of speaks to the fact, like social media, when it first started off. I remember years ago, Scott, where it was more of a free for all then than it was today, so to speak. And the fact that people were still learning about it, they were trying to figure out what was going on, and everything was new, and there wasn't much regulatory action, so to speak. And now, when you think about where things are at, it's social media has matured more than it did, say, 12 years ago, 14 years ago. I mean, it's come a long way. And so, same thing with, the stock market's been around a long time, but the internet, the fact that social media can drive attention, that's something that I probably suspect that it surprised everybody when all these Reddit users just started jumping on the stock. They had no idea that what they were getting with, and boom, it took off like a rocket.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the heart of the issue in social media today is that it's factual information or misinformation or disinformation, and you really have to verify what you see. It's got to go back to my first point. It's all about relationships. If you want to invest money, then get a good relationship with a financial advisor that takes care of things like that for you, and advises you in a trusted way, and don't jump onto the bandwagon of potential misinformation on social media. It's you really have to be cognizant for what is a fact and what is not a fact out there.
Yeah, it's easy.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, Rob.
I would agree with that. And a classic example is, for those who don't know, it's worth mentioning, Jeff Scott and I all met because of social media. So we're talking about relationships, and we've collaborated on many projects over the years, whether it's workplace education, whether it's a community project, whether it's other things on the go. So, I know we're talking about the sad state, but we also got to be very careful. Social media does have its uses and its channels for the right reasons. And that's something we got to remember before we continue to kind of dump on it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I instantly come to the Crime Stoppers Leave a Tip tab. That was brilliant. And it did a lot of good. And at the end of the day, what I helped have a part in creating actually may have, at the end of the day, saved my two daughters from an incident in Halifax many years ago. And so there's a lot of good that came out of that.
Yep, so true. Let's move on to my second favorite heavy topic. And, before this, I had Al Dagir on. And at the time of this recording, the former President Trump is in impeachment proceedings as we speak. And I'm not even going to touch on the political side of it in terms of that. But a couple of weeks ago, when they went to ratify Joe Biden as the new president, we had a problem on the Capitol. And frankly, that was all caused by a mob, which grew because of social media, in my opinion. Does one of you have an opinion on that topic?
Go ahead, Scott, because you're probably privy to more insider details.
Well, I don't have a lot of insider details, but I definitely watched that whole situation, and I've been watching the fallout from it. I'm quite concerned with censorship on social media. I'm also concerned about hate on social media, and bullying and harassment on social media.
Yep.
And I'm also very cognizant of kind of reputation and optics of social media companies. And when Donald Trump's social media account was taken off by Facebook and Twitter, I'm not a big Trump supporter or fan, but it was very concerning to me that if the big social media giants can do that to the president of the United States, what are they going to do to law enforcement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we put out in the policing world, social media is the new kind of police scanner, because a lot of radio systems are encrypted, and a lot of media, they follow our social media updates, and the police services are putting a lot of very important, relevant information in real time out that is actually life-saving. And sometimes the wording of those messages could be seen by a spam filter or a bot that's trying to stop something or censor something, and next thing you know, your account's suspended, and that is happening. I do know of law enforcement accounts that have been suspended for putting things up like videos of a crime scene trying to identify suspects. And next thing you know, there's complaints being put in that the content is inappropriate, and next thing you know, accounts are being suspended. So we're actually trying to keep the community safe and identify suspects in pretty serious incidents. And obviously we've got a lens to inappropriate content. We're not going to put something completely gross or that nobody should see out there. But when we're trying to identify suspects in legitimate investigations, and accounts they're being reported by whoever's reporting it, and next thing you know, the companies are suspending our accounts, that's very concerning to me as a law enforcement representative.
Well, that would be equivalent to you've had a crime, you're putting information in the newspaper. Next thing you know, the newspaper literally takes it out. I mean, you're trying to solve crimes. You're trying to be positive in the community. We're trying to take the bad guy out of the community. And so we've got a picture of a bad guy or a video of a bad guy, for instance, doing something. We want the community to help, so to speak, in apprehending or providing information. This has been nothing new, but what's new is the fact that the information that's going out there now is getting law enforcement in accounts suspended and that kind of stuff, where what they're trying to do is help get it out to community and take bad guys off the street.
Yeah, well, people in the know that work in law enforcement, IT specialists and things like that, they've been raising this potential flag for a long time, that law enforcement really needs to have their own kind of video service servers and things like that, and not rely on things like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. But the bottom line is you want to be able to communicate with the public, because it's the public that law enforcement is sworn to protect. And you need to have that dialogue with each other. So yeah, as a law enforcement agency, you have to go onto the platforms that are active, that have a lot of community engagement on them, and put your information there. So wherever the community goes, the police need to go, because the police are no good without the community.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of a slippery slope when you see the censorship. I've had people in my life, close to me, that in the last say 6 months, they've closed all their social media accounts because they're quite upset about the censorship that's going on all of the platforms. And it starts to makes you wonder, right? Like, what's the motivation? Like, we obviously don't want hate speech out there. We don't want anything homophobic. We don't want anti-Semitism out there. We don't want a lot of things that are detrimental. There's lots of hate out there towards women. I agree that all needs to be filtered out. But just because somebody has an opinion that's different than ours, it's a very fine line to walk about what's going to get removed and what's not. Like, for instance, I've submitted things before about significant videos of child abuse that are caused. So many people are reporting to me as a law enforcement officer. And I try to report to the social media companies to actually get it removed, and they come back to me and say it doesn't meet their terms of removal. It doesn't meet the criteria, and I'm like, this is an absolutely horrendous video that's causing people extreme, upset because a child is being beaten, and you're telling me that it's not able to be removed from your site because it doesn't meet your terms of use. What are the terms of use? And then you start seeing some of the political ones going down. The easiest one to say is Trump, right? He's the president of the United States. You might not like what he's got to say, but taking away his social media accounts is a scary, scary thing.
Well, who's next, and for what reason? I mean, maybe you say something that's not according to the party line, so to speak. And we see a lot of that with the CC, Chinese Communist Party, right, over in China. Their social media credit score. Man, if your credit score is not good, there's no bus, there's no train, there's no transportation for you, kind of thing. I mean, do we really, like, taking Trump down, is that the first step into a slippery slope where literally now we look at our social media before we go and see if we can get a mortgage or not? I mean, where does this thing end?
It's already happening. I mean, my wife is a property manager, and I'm going to tell you, any two tenants she's ever had, the far and few, the first thing she does is do a social media search to see what their apartment looks like. Are they clean? Are they not clean? And stuff like that. Like, it happens all the time. And the first thing employers do, and both I've just switched into a job, and they went and creeped social media to see if my profiles were clean. I mean, they're looking. So I would be hard pressed to believe that if you're going for mortgage, the mortgage brokers aren't checking you out on social media. That's the first thing. The second thing we got to be really careful of is the censorship, because the problem is it's human mentality. What's happening on social media, I used to say as a marketer, people would read the first paragraph. Now it's all by headlines. And if you want to believe headlines don't matter, I think you're wrong, because if you read the comments, take the Toronto Star, take the Globe and Mail, take the Washington Post, people are commenting based on the headline, not on reading the article. And you can almost guarantee, based on the comments I'm reading, they haven't read the article. So what I'm going to tell marketers and businesses out there is headlines matter more than ever now, because that will get your reaction, not what's in the text.
Yeah, that is concerning, because a lot of people don't realize that the author, the journalist who's doing the story, they're not the ones that are actually making the headline. That's the copy editor that's making the headline. And many times that headline doesn't match what the journalist who put the work into the story had in mind, and it actually causes them a lot of problems with the people the story's about, because the headline doesn't fit with the tone and the actual story. So that is a very big challenge out there. Is these headlines, because people do read headlines, and I tell you, in my world, it really the headlines can really cause a lot of problems.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
we are no longer a nation of readers. We're a nation of scanners. And it's so easy. I mean, I teach my workplace education participants how to write headlines to get noticed in the news feed. And my wife says it's a good thing you're good and not evil, because it's very easy to manipulate, so to speak. Those headlines can literally make or break whether people stop and read your article or not. And some people, I mean, those copy editors literally are, it's what sells reads. Basically, they write for sales.
And they're good at what they do. But Scott, I agree with you. I mean, we are a generation of scanners, and the problem is we're also a generation of I want it now. Nobody wants to do the research. Nobody wants to do the reading. Nobody wants to do the background work to find out if this is valid or not. I mean, I'm at the point, and both of you are quite aware of this, I got so fed up 3 weeks ago. I do not have any social media on my cell phone at all anymore. And that's because of the state of it. I removed it. So the only place I get it is on my home tablet, which is not in reach of me all day, or on my PC. I do not get social media whatsoever on my phone. And somebody said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, at the end of the day, how is this benefiting me to watch all this garbage going on? Like, thoughts on that one, guys?
I'll let you go first, Scott.
It's I've had people telling me this too, and in my world, like I'm doing social media professionally for a professional organization, and a number of the members even of the organization aren't on it for that very reason, and for whatever reason they choose not to be on it. I get that. I get that point. It also can be very distracting. You're trying to focus on the task at hand, and next thing you know, you're scrolling through your phone. It's very addictive. So I get that. I also do think it's very important in this day and age to know how the main social media platforms work and know what is out there on social media platforms and what's being said and how it's working. Because if you don't know how it works, the world's happening around you and then you're unaware of it. And it's especially important for somebody like a police officer to be very aware about what's being said on social media, because your situational awareness is just that much greater if you keep an eye on what's going on social media. And
it's actually critical for their lives. If they know what's going on in the community, they can get a pulse. I mean, social media gets the pulse faster. I mean, years ago, walking the beat, getting to know the community, they would tell you stuff's going on. They would tell you, hey, you better not go down that block because there's a bunch of guys looking for you. And so social media kind of works that way. But we also know now, because of the algorithms, they're heavily filtered.
Yeah. So like something, you being from Nova Scotia, Jeff, the whole thing about an alert that goes out and makes our phones ring when something terrible is happening and we need to kind of shelter in place type thing save our lives. That happened out in Nova Scotia. And, the police out there, they put some things out on social media, and it became a big deal about the alert not going out in a major situation that happened. And, the alert is similar to kind of an Amber Alert for a missing child. But it's this through the same system actually. But it's for kind of an emerging incident, like an active shooter situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it's unbelievable every time an Amber Alert goes out, the amount of people
that are pissed off.
They complain because their phone went off
at 2 a.m.
And it's just I don't know what the answer is, but it comes back to this. Okay, I'm not going to listen to social media because of whatever reason, right? Um, is that the same sentiment as I'm going to turn off the alerts because I don't want my day to be interrupted by an alert that potentially could save my life or save the life of somebody else?
Well, let me put it into perspective here, because this was what happened in Nova Scotia was very personal. My good buddy Dave and I were doing some tech work for live streaming, and we were in a building. But as it was happening, I was getting texts from my my daughter Catherine, who's up in Quebec, and the tweets were going out, and the RCMP were updating people on Twitter. Unfortunately, there were people that got up that day that didn't have a Twitter account, and one of them was my wife's cousin's son's wife. Her and another nurse got in a car and they drove, and the imposter pulled them over and shot him. And so I would have taken an Amber Alert any day. To think about, it could have saved someone's life. I would have allowed it to annoy somebody if it could have saved a life. And when it comes to an Amber Alert, if you're going to save a kid, my goodness, where are we as people if we can't put up with an Amber Alert because a kid is going missing? Some mom, some dad is literally out of their minds, and you're complaining about an Amber Alert? My goodness, she should be all hands on deck. Let's find this kid. Let's return this child to its family instead of complaining about an Amber Alert, or the fact that there wasn't an Amber Alert in Nova Scotia at that time. That was a horrific experience. I mean, it was just, the poser was literally in Truro for a short period of time. I mean, you want to talk about one of the most sacred things, masquerading as a police officer and killing people, something that's so respected. To do that is absolutely one of the cruelest things I could think of. And that is just unthinkable. And the fact that if some people had had that Amber Alert, they'd still be alive today. I would tell you, if you're upset at Amber Alerts, you know what? I won't say it on here.
So Amber Alert, just to be clear for the listeners, Amber Alert is a very, very specific thing that sends an alert out in relation to a missing child, and there's very specific criteria. In Ontario, the Amber Alert system is run by the Ontario Provincial Police, so a police service of jurisdiction. If they want an Amber Alert out, they have to meet the criteria, and the OPP has to put it out. That's different from an emergency alert. It's through the same system, but it's a lot of people interchange the terminology of it. So the emergency alert would be for something like this, where there was basically a man with a gun in a police car that wasn't a police officer that was pulling people over and shooting them on the side of the road out in Nova Scotia. So that would be an emergency alert. And I empathize with you there, Jeff. I've been teaching social media to police officers, as you know, for years.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do when I get up in the morning, or the first thing I do where I've been kind of tuned out for a while, is I go and I check lists on Twitter. And I have all of the relevant social media emergency management people on a list. And I've got that right on my Twitter account. And I think that's the most important thing that I teach, is how to listen and be situationally aware on Twitter, because Twitter is where all of the news breaks.
Absolutely.
And honestly, before I leave my house, I go on Twitter and I look at the social media emergency management list that's on the Toronto Police Operations at TPS Operations account. And I look at it because throughout the greater Toronto area, it's got every single emergency management partner on there. So anything going on there, from a weather issue to maybe there's like an alert that's going out for a missing child, or maybe there's like an active shooter or something there, I would see that. And I just think that's why it's so important. Like Rob was saying, he took the social media off his phone. I'd encourage Rob to put it back on his phone, just for Twitter, just so he can listen to those lists and get in the habit of using them, because you can become so situationally aware, in order to protect your own personal safety, if you know where you're listening. And some of the points we made earlier about social media for the good, yeah, we kind of started off this show kind of slagging it, saying it's for the bad. There's a lot of good that goes on social media, and that's one of them. And just that you saying that, Jeff, and my condolences to you and everybody affected out in Nova Scotia.
Thank you.
I just wish, your relative, the person close to you, the nurse that was going to work, I wish she had that training of that we give about listening, how to listen on social media so that you're aware of what's going on around you. There's just so many what ifs, but it's something I'm very passionate about, is teaching people how to use social media, using it for good. I call it social media for success and safety, and relationships and technology, and the purpose. If you use it with purpose and process, you'll get payoff for yourself and the potential for other opportunities. Like I've been flown around the world to do a lot of good in relation to social media. But having said that, I know a lot of people that their lives have been turned upside down because of social media, because they've been targeting of a doxing campaign. They've been bullied. There's people that have, conditions like autism, and they get triggered, and from something they see on social media, and they sometimes they have a hard time, just like everybody does, to understand what's fact and what's fiction. And
Absolutely.
like my life has really been impacted by social media, and I keep in touch with a lot of people from a lot of different realms, including Rob and Jeff here. We're always connecting on social media. Just because Rob doesn't have social media on his phone doesn't mean he's watching it, people, just so you know.
I'm still on social media. I've just chosen not to have it on my phone. I'm probably an abnormal on that one. It's on my tablet. So I often sit there at night with it in my hand. It just helps me regulate time. But I agree, you have to be on it to some degree to follow what's going on with either things in the world, journalism, even big brands to some degree. There is a lot of good that goes on. No question.
I've been checking out stats before I came on just to take a look, and we see overall, and this is from Sprawl Social, Facebook comments decreased by 5.6 per day. Facebook private messages 2.1 per day. Twitter messages 16, decreased by 16 per day. Twitter retweets decreased by 20. The only place that's growing in comments is Instagram, basically. And there is something that's coming. There's a Apple and Facebook are in a Donnybrook. They're in a fisticuffs as far as what's coming.
Actually, it's not just Apple and Facebook. It's Apple and everybody. So the approach, for those who don't know, that Apple has taken is the Safari browser now blocks cookies. And the problem with that is many legitimate websites don't work well, but it also makes jobs for guys like me harder, because marketing to do a Facebook tracking pixel, and for those who don't know, that's basically so Facebook can retarget ads at you for sites you've been on. It's harder to do if the person's running Safari because of that. And a lot of people are going to browsers like Brave as well, which also blocks tracking cookies. So the war between the manufacturers and the browsers are going on. But all this is going to cause, frankly, is companies like Facebook to say, oh, you want this level of access? It's $29.95 a month. Because what people need to realize is that something is no cost. And notice how I don't use the word free. The cost of using that service is you being the product. And people need to realize that very simple and realize nothing is ever free in this life, including social media.
Yeah. And we see a lot of people, as a result of this, started to take a break from their social media. People literally are just not on there as much. I mean, some of the people I talk to, hey, when's the last time you've been on social media? It's been a while. And these were avid social media people. And from a marketing perspective, I look at these are potential customers. If they're not tuning in, then social media won't be as effective as we want it to be. And it was going great guns. But as Scott brought up, the censorship of Trump, who was, let's not forget that Twitter was going down the toilet before Trump. And whether you like him or not is not a thing, but Twitter began to surge. And now that they've taken him off, I mean, they're losing money big time. People are tuning out.
And the other thing they did, Jeff, was not only when Trump left, the problem I have is Twitter turned around and deleted all the followers to the POS account, President of the United States account. And how do you do that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. And now that they've done it to Trump and the U.S. government, what's to say they don't do it to the CEO, like a guy like Elon Musk? What's to say they don't do it to Jeff Bezos because he pees somebody off? What's to say they don't do it to Justin Trudeau? And then it goes on and goes on and goes on. And this is why I don't like this whole slippery slope we've gone down, because now that we've opened up the door once, I guarantee you it will be easier and easier and easier to open up again. Scott?
Absolutely.
I do like what some of the social media companies did, including Twitter. Twitter was the most obvious one in the U.S. election, where statements were being made that were disputed in relation to official election results. I think that's responsible, as long as you've got an official source. Like I'm not sure what that process was, but as long as there's an official source coming through about official election results, and that's used as the bar, I think that's a good thing. To actually flag that, say, this claim is disputed. I thought that was a good idea, but I definitely didn't think it was a good idea when all of a sudden accounts were deleted and followers were being taken away. That's really concerning.
Because if social media is supposed to be the discussion, when you literally shut one side of the discussion down, that's not social media anymore. And that's the big issue, is that, hey, we may not agree. We don't have to go look and watch. We may not agree. But Donald Trump's expression is equally as important as anybody's expression online, simply for the fact that you may not like what he says, but you get to say something too. And I've looked at his thread, and my goodness, some of the stuff that they've said on that to Trump, it was just curdled my dead mother's ears. You know what I mean? It was just mean. And you're talking about, Scott, you're talking about bullying. You're talking about just people being absolutely vile.
Yeah. I saw a tweet this morning. It was actually brought to my attention by another a police officer, high-ranking police officer, actually, that runs some social media accounts. And the account basically, or the tweet basically said, and I put it onto I basically quote tweeted it saying, "Amen." It basically said that I wish people knew that there are real people with real feelings and real thoughts that are operating business accounts.
So true.
Because there is so much vitriol and hate, and I don't think a lot of people would say what they're saying on social media directly to your face if they actually knew who the people were that were doing those accounts. Like the people that are running big business accounts and big law enforcement accounts and any big organization's accounts, they're very skilled. And the hashtag, I believe, was something to do with mental health. Mental health matters, right? When you get so much hate on your social media accounts, as kind of a, that's your job, you're the social media manager, it starts to get to you.
Absolutely.
Scott, the burnout is really high in that field. I've lived in that field as a consultant for many, many years. And I'll tell you, colleagues I've talked to, and even people I've talked to in industry, the burnout rate is over 70%. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And these guys don't know how to unplug. As you know, you've been there. They don't know how to turn it off because they're looking at feeds till midnight. They don't know how to shut it down. And like, is that a way to live? Like, really?
Yeah.
Well,
definitely. Like that brings up a really good point. If you're going to have a social media presence and you're a large brand, you need more than one person doing it, and it needs to go on shift work. You pretty much need 24/7 coverage if you're a big company, if you're a big law enforcement agency, or you're a big government organization, and you need to put into your plan that you're going to need a lot of staff because the staff do need to turn off. They do need to switch off, and they do need to get away from it. But when they come back into it, it needs to be up to date because it happens so fast and so many things happen, even overnight, that it needs to be taken care of, and there needs to be a kind of a shift work handoff to the next person if you're going to actually do it well.
Yeah, not only that, but they need to have good leadership and almost times for the debriefing. How did your shift go? How is this stuff sticking to you? And at the end of the day, people need to learn to be able to walk away and just let it drop. And now that's hard in law enforcement because people go into law enforcement because a lot of times because they care. Yeah, and it's hard to turn the caring off.
It's also hard in this point came up in my world this week as well. Journalists, I deal with a lot of journalists, and I'm in law enforcement in the social media and media realm, and the vicarious trauma that comes to people that are actually in charge of communications is incredibly high, and it's not something that is really recognized. And vicarious trauma basically means that something traumatic happens, you don't actually witness it, but you're hearing about it, and all the gory details are coming your way, and it's actually triggering you. And so the mental health of people that are doing these jobs definitely needs to be taken into consideration. And that goes for journalists, that goes for anybody in law enforcement that's doing a media role, anybody that's in, paramedic services or the fire department, or, anything that's got any regular amount of trauma. You need to build into your strategy for human resources that you have enough people to cover, that those people are allowed to turn off, and that they're allowed to take vacation, and that they have an outlet to debrief if they need to. And I can tell you for a fact that is not happening across the board right now.
Well, I watched, and I am thankful that I hooked you and Rob up, Scott, because I watched through the years and I just wasn't there. And that kind of bugged me a bit. But some of the stuff that you went through because of social media, all that stuff, I'm thankful that you and Rob were connected, because that was a support network when really law enforcement wasn't aware that support networks needed to happen. It was suck it up, it's your job, get over it. And you know what I mean?
It's not just law enforcement. I think a lot of, shall we say, European people and older people have the attitude, suck it up and get over it too. So I wouldn't just put it out there. Yeah. And they don't understand. Like, I've been doing social media since before it was called social media. So I started off doing CompuServe CB chat. That was social media before we coined it social media. I started off doing internet relay chat. That was social media before we called it that way. And, the crap you'd see, and people would say, oh, it's not real. Oh, I'm flirting with somebody, but I'm married. Who cares? And I used to say, well, you got to remember, people have really real feelings. What Scott said earlier, And I have a good friend of mine who's a teacher, and she says the same thing to people. She says, do you not realize who's behind the screen? Like, do you not get that? And we got to keep that in mind. You would never walk in and say half the stuff people say to somebody in person, right? So why would you do it there? It's just an extension of life. And people say social media is not real. I would be the first to argue. I've got friends all over the world I talk to on a regular basis from here to India, and that's because of social media. I mean, there's no question of it.
Absolutely, and it does impact. And we just got to start thinking everything's in real life, and we need to start treating people. I mean, we're always quick to jump to the bad when, hey, maybe we take a pause, we do a little checking before we start ripping and tearing the strip off people. I mean, we need to learn to be a little bit nicer.
Yeah. My rule of thumb on that, Jeff, is if you're going to put out a tweet or a post and you think it's going to cause an issue, write it, put it in a notepad file, sit on it for 24 hours and think about it. And then if you can get past what I call the 24-hour checkpoint, then put it up. But if you can't, if it's that controversial, maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, in my experience over the years, my gut has always been my best defense against putting something. And I'm putting a post together, it doesn't feel right. I may not see it, but there's a reason why it's not right, and I won't post it. And I've always tried to be very charitable to people. Always try to be positive. I mean, it comes back to what your mother said: if you can't say anything nice to someone, then don't say anything. But that's generally not the case. And I love a good, robust discussion. But a discussion is, hey, you've got your view, I've got maybe we talk about it, maybe we learn, but we walk away good. That's not happening. And it only seems to be getting worse. Social media seems to be drifting down. This is what's turning people off. It's drifting to personal attacks. It's drifting to assassinating people's characters, for instance, when that's not really what social media really intended to be. And then when you've got technocrats editing and censoring stuff, that's they're moving away from their mandate. And that's where I believe 230 is going to come in. And at the end of the day, my gut tells me that there's going to be a cost to all this stuff. And it's going to be a wake-up call for these tech people that the way they're running their ships right now, it's going to cost them. And we're just going to wait and see. But my gut says that it's going to bite them on the arse, as my grandmother used to say. She was a Cape Breton. That was the first few things she taught me in Gaelic. Buck mahal, bite me on the arse. And so I see some stuff coming because they have not been faithful stewards of the privilege of what they've been given. Big organizations, a lot of people have trusted them. And over the years, we've seen that trust has been abused in a lot of different ways. Yep. But it all comes back to, if you're going to censor people, you can censor one, you can censor all. You just need to come up with the reason. And that's not what social media should be about.
Yep. Scott?
I echo everything Jeff just said. I truly think that you have to think before you post. I completely agree with if you're going to post something that's kind of inflammatory to have a cooling off period, and come back to it an hour later or a day later, and if you still want to post it, then go. I also think it's really good. Context is a big issue.
Yeah.
Everything you can, something like Twitter, I think you got 280 characters now. You used to have 140, but you can't really say what you need to say. So, doing a thread on Twitter is a good thing to give it more context, or put a link to a blog post on a website that you've got kind of the whole context of the story. And it's kind of similar to a copy editor putting a kind of a catchy headline on something, right?
Yeah. And that was one of the things we've done some training together, Scott. One one of the things that came up in with the Nova Scotia fiasco was that everything wasn't under a thread. It was lone tweet by lone tweet. If it had been put in a thread, for instance, it would have been able to you would have been able to follow really quick.
Yeah.
And so there's still lots of learning for almost everybody, regardless of your field. Lots of learning to do to make things better. But
yeah, well, that's a really good point. Like I was always a big advocate for making sure that whatever incident it is in the law enforcement world, that if you do a tweet, when you do the update, you reply to the tweet and make sure everything's on the same thread. The same thing goes for Facebook, because I know where I was working, I was big about putting things out on Twitter and Facebook for two reasons. One or the other could go down. The other, so you want to have an audience on both, and there's a different audience on both, and that's where the vast majority of the people were at the time. So you always have to reevaluate that. Do you want to go for more platforms, or do you want to go? You should have more than just one in law enforcement. And when you do an update, it's no good. I called it alphabet soup. It's not as effective if you put something out on Facebook, especially, and you just keep putting more posts. You need to go into the existing one, hit the edit button, and add to the post and put the date and the time of the update.
Yeah.
Those are really, really, really important things, especially in an emergency.
Yeah. And it all I've been kind of holding back and wanting to not go there. But with all this, there's bad apples in every organization, and this defund the police, it just really grieves my heart, because at the end of the day, if the police are gone, someone breaking into your house and you're calling 911 and there's no one there to answer it. I mean, there's a lot. I have met a lot of wonderful law enforcement officers, and it's like any organization, there can always be one bad apple in the bunch, but they're a great bunch of people that are really wanting to help the community. They want the social media because they can get out there faster and go farther and do a lot of good before they can even get there. And that's where this censoring or removing of law enforcement off social media is not a great idea.
It's also for kind of the safety of everybody involved in a major incident like that, like stay away from the area. But it's also a lot of times people will see where a law enforcement officer is positioned in relation to a tactical operation that's on their way for, say, like an active shooter, and they post on social media the actual what was going on, right?
We saw that in Moncton.
Yeah, and so it's really important. Like I know the people that were doing the social media there in Moncton, and ironically, 2 weeks before Moncton happened, the person that was doing a lot of that social media, he did just an absolutely bang up job in that New Brunswick incident on the social media. And 2 weeks prior, I was in Tampa, Florida with that individual doing a training course, and he was like a sponge, learning all of these techniques and information. And 2 weeks later, he's in the heart of it. And I actually nominated him for an award internationally for the work that guy did. And he's still involved. I know he was directly involved in that second kind of scare that happened after the Nova Scotia shooting. And some of these points that I was talking about, him and I were actually on the phone together and saying, make sure the Facebook's all on one post. Okay, yeah, Scott, yeah, we got it, Scott. We're on it. And
I remember that.
Little things, and it's very intricate. And you have to remain calm under pressure. And the ultimate evil for everything that law enforcement has planned to try and keep people safe on social media and in an emergency incident is if someone were to shut down our accounts. And that's why getting back to this whole Trump thing scares me to death.
Yeah.
I get that, and it wouldn't take much. So, this is a discussion we could go on for hours and hours. The three of us, unfortunately, will not solve the problems of the social media world in an hour. I think we've brought out some really good insight to some people. So I'm going to kind of wrap up a little bit. I'm going to ask each of you for a tip and where they can contact you. So let's start with Jeff. What's a good tip to make social media a better place, and how can people get a hold of you?
One of the things that I always teach my participants is, regardless of where social media is going, build community around your business. Treat people like people and not like numbers. Don't say you've got a Facebook page with 1,000 fans. Say you've got a Facebook page that has a Sally, that's got a Robert, that's got a Scott. You start thinking about people in that light, you're going to raise up a great community, because every time they interact with your social media, it's going to be a moment of great joy, and that's going to impact them. So build community. As always, website's alphasocialmediainc.com. And it's jbrown at alphasocialmediainc.com if you want to get a hold of me.
Scott, your tip?
My tip is completely agree with what Jeff just said, but my tip is to be kind, be aware, investigate and look into new social media sites, be open to it, and learn how to listen on social media. It might just save your life.
Absolutely.
And if anybody wants help with that, you can reach me at scottmills@gmail.com. There's one T in the email, because if
Put two T's in,
it goes to somebody that really hates me. A lot of emails. So Scott Mills with one T at gmail.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of me. If I were to lose my Gmail account, I would lose all my contacts. So this censorship thing, we really have to be mindful of it. We got a long way to go on this. There needs to be a lot of collaboration with the regulatory agencies, the governments, the social media companies, and bottom line is, we need to be kind, and we need to get along, and we need to really listen to people that are in the know. So in a nutshell, my advice is be kind and learn how to use social media effectively. It might save your life.
Absolutely.
So true. And I kind of throw it out there. I think what we need to do is, my motto kind of always is, treat people the way you want to be treated, and go the extra mile, and then the world's a better place. Thanks, Scott and Jeff, for joining me today. As always, Rob Cairns with the SDM show from the center of the universe called Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks, guys. Be well, be safe, and do us one favor, stay at home and be careful.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks
Rob.
Bye-bye. And we are done. Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening to the STM show. The show is a production of Stunning Digital Marketing, and all rights are reserved. Rob can be reached by email at vip@stunningdigitalmarketing.com, on Twitter @Rob Cairns, on his website, stunningdigitalmarketing.com, and on his website there's links to all his social media platforms. This show is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.